Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking into something really interesting about generosity, about charity. Does it matter who needs help? And, maybe more surprisingly, does the reason they need help change how much we're willing to give? We're diving into a study today that, well, it uncovers some pretty complex gender dynamics in charitable giving.
Absolutely. It's fascinating stuff. The research we're looking at is by Orly Bareket. She's affiliated with Tel Aviv University and Princeton University, and also Danit Ein-Gar from Tel Aviv University, and Tehila Kogut from Ben Gurion University, the Negev. Their paper came out in 2022 in Group Processes Intergroup Relations, and the title really hints at the core finding. I will help you survive but not thrive. Helping decisions in situations that empower women.
Survive but not thrive. Wow. Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is clear. We want to unpack what this research found. How did they actually figure this out? What methods did they use? And maybe most importantly, what do these findings tell us about the kind of hidden biases that might be influencing how we help each other?
Exactly. It's about those subtle undercurrents.
So let's get started. What was the foundation here? What ideas or, previous research were they building on?
Well, the researchers, Bareket, Ein-Gar, and Kogut, they started by looking at what we already sort of knew about gender and helping behavior, prosociality. There's this concept called male chivalry. Work by people like Eagly and Croft and others has explored this. The idea is that men often step in to offer supportive help to women.
Right, the sort of traditional helping role.
Exactly. But the twist is, this help isn't always, let's say, empowering. It can sometimes reinforce traditional roles rather than challenge them. So the researchers spotted a gap. Does this male chivalry thing still apply when helping a woman might actually empower her? Give her a leg up professionally, for instance.
Okay. So does the helpfulness drop off when the help could lead to more equality or maybe challenge the status quo a bit?
Precisely. And to explore why that might happen, they brought in a framework called social dominance theory. This theory, developed by folks like Prado and Sedanius, suggests that, well, dominant groups in society tend to be motivated to keep things the way they are, to maintain the hierarchy.
Keep the existing power structure in place.
Yeah, especially if they feel that structure is somehow threatened. So applying that to gender, if men are historically the dominant group, then situations that empower women could potentially be seen as a threat to that hierarchy by some.
Okay, that makes sense. So the core hypothesis they were testing is that men might be perhaps unconsciously less inclined to help women, specifically when that help could boost the woman's status or independence.
That's the central argument, yes.
Yeah.
Bareket and her colleagues predicted that men's helping of women would be more limited in contexts that are empowering, contexts that could potentially shift that gender hierarchy. And they chose to look at this through charitable donations because, well, giving money can be empowering, right? Especially depending on what it's for.
Right. Giving someone funds to rebuild a business is different from helping with, say, immediate survival needs. Which leads us perfectly into their first study. What do they actually do in study one?
Okay, study one. The goal was pretty direct. Test if men donate less money to women in an empowering context. They used a business setting compared to a non-empowering one, which is a domestic setting. They used what's called a between subjects design. That just means each participant only saw one version of the scenario.
Okay, so different people saw different situations. How many people took part, and what were these scenarios like?
They recruited 566 American adults online through Prolific. Each person read a short, sort of fictional news piece about wildfires. Then they saw an appeal for donations from someone supposedly affected by the fire. And here are the key manipulations. The victim was either a man or a woman, and the fire destroyed either their house, that's the domestic context, or their shop, their business, that's a business context.
Got it. House fire versus shop fire, man versus woman. And they also tracked the gender of the participant doing the donating, right?
Absolutely. That was crucial. The donor's gender was the moderator they were looking at.
So what was the actual task? What were they measuring?
They asked participants, imagine you won a raffle prize. How much of it would you donate to this person? It was on a 0 to 10 scale. So the dependent variable, the thing they measured, was the hypothetical donation amount.
Okay, makes sense. So the big question, what happened? What did the results show?
The results were pretty striking. They found a significant three-way interaction.
Whoa, okay. A three-way interaction, that sounds complex. What does that mean in simple terms?
It means the effect of the situation, business versus home, depended on both the gender of the person needing help and the gender of the person giving the help. It all works together.
Okay, so break that down. What was the specific pattern?
Here's the key finding.
Yeah.
Male participants, the men making the donation decisions, they donated significantly less money to women whose shops had burned down compared to men whose shops had burned down.
Wow. So same business context, but men gave less if the owner was a woman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's more. Male participants also donated less to women who lost their shops compared to women who lost their homes.
So men gave less to the businesswoman than the woman who lost her home. But what about when the victim was male?
When the person needing help was a man, the male donors gave similar amounts, regardless of whether it was his house or his shop. The context didn't seem to matter for male recipients receiving help from male donors.
That's really specific. And what about female donors? Did they show the same pattern?
No, and that's equally important. Female participants didn't show this bias. Their donation amounts didn't significantly differ based on the recipient's gender or whether it was a house or a shop.
Okay, so study 1 provides pretty strong initial evidence then. Men, but not women, seem to donate less generously to women, specifically in that business context, compared to men in the same context and compared to women in a domestic context.
That's the conclusion from study 1, yes. It sets the stage really well for the next step.
Which was study 2. How did they build on these findings? What did they change?
Well, study 2 had a couple of goals. First, they wanted to see if this bias held up in a situation where people were directly comparing a man and a woman in need, like a head-to-head choice.
So not just rating one person, but choosing between two.
Exactly, a joint evaluation. And second, they wanted to explore a potential psychological mechanism. Why were men donating less in the business context? They decided to look at empathy.
Empathy. Okay, so how did they set this one up?
They had 300 university students participate this time. Again, people were assigned to one of two contexts, domestic or business. In the domestic context, they saw appeals from both a man and a woman who had lost their homes in a fire. In the business context, they saw appeals from both a man and a woman who had lost their shops. They cleverly used different types of shops, counterbalanced to make sure it wasn't about preferring, say, a bookstore over a hardware store.
Smart. So ruling out other explanations, what did participants do then?
First, they had to indicate who they would prefer to donate to, the man or the woman. Then they decided how much to donate to their chosen person, this time on a scale of 0 to 50 Israeli shekels. And after making their donation decision, they rated how much empathy they felt for the person they chose to help, using a simple 7-point scale.
Okay, so they looked at donation choice, donation amount, and empathy. Let's take those one by one. What happened with the choice? Who did people prefer to donate to?
Looking at the choice, they again found an interaction, this time between the donation context and the donor's gender. Specifically, in the business context, male donors were significantly less likely to choose the female recipient compared to the male recipient. This tendency was stronger for male donors than for female donors.
So men leaned towards helping the man over the woman when both lost businesses, more so than women did.
That's what the choice data suggests, yes. But importantly, in the domestic context, when both lost their homes, there wasn't a significant difference between male and female donors in who they chose to help. The gender bias in choice was specific to the business setting for male donors.
Okay, that mirrors the first study's findings, but now in a direct choice scenario. What about the amount donated? Did that follow the same pattern?
It did. They basically replicated the three-way interaction they found in Study 1 regarding donation amounts. Once again, male participants donated less to the female recipients than to the male recipients, but only in the business context. Male participants also gave less to women in the business context compared to women in the domestic context.
And again, same pattern for male recipients.
Yes, male donors gave similar amounts to male recipients in both the business and domestic context. And female donors, again, showed no significant gender bias in their donation amounts in either context.
The consistency is quite striking. So the bias holds for both choice and amount. Now, what about empathy? Did that explain why?
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting. The researchers tested if empathy mediated or explained that three-way interaction on the donation amount, and it did. What they found was that male donors reported feeling less empathy for the female recipients, specifically in the business context compared to the domestic context.
Less empathy for the businesswoman compared to the woman who lost her home.
Correct. And crucially, this lower level of reported empathy predicted the lower donation amounts given to those women in the business context.
Wow. And did the context affect empathy for male recipients or for female donors?
No. The donation context didn't significantly influence how much empathy male donors felt for male recipients, and it didn't influence how much empathy female donors felt for either male or female recipients. The empathy dip was specific to male donors evaluating female recipients in the business setting.
So it seems like there's an emotional disconnect, specifically for men when faced with a woman needing help in a business domain, and that translates into less financial support.
That seems to be the key mechanism identified in Study 2. Lower empathy partly explains the reduced help.
Okay, so pulling these two studies together, what does this research really add to our understanding? What are the main theoretical contributions here?
Well, I think it makes a really important contribution by knitting together different strands of research, gender roles, helping behavior, and the social dominance theory. It directly challenges that simpler, older idea that men are just always more helpful towards women,
Yeah.
the chivalry argument.
It shows it's much more conditional than that.
Exactly. It highlights that men's willingness to help might decrease when that help could actually empower women in a way that potentially nudges the existing gender hierarchy.
It's not just about helping, but about the implications of that help for the power dynamic.
Precisely. And it suggests that even when men do help women in business, the help might be, as the title says, more about survival than thriving. Enough to keep going, perhaps, but maybe not enough to truly compete or succeed at a high level.
Which points to a really subtle kind of barrier, doesn't it? Not necessarily outright conscious discrimination, but something rooted in maintaining that social structure.
Yes, a psychological barrier linked to hierarchy maintenance. And the theory also helps explain why women didn't show the same bias.
Right. How does social dominance theory account for the female donor's behavior?
Well, the theory posits that groups lower in a social hierarchy generally have less motivation to uphold that hierarchy. They might be ambivalent or even motivated to challenge it. So women, as a group that's historically faced disadvantages relative to men in many hierarchies, might not have that same subconscious drive to limit help that could empower other women.
Yeah.
If anything, they might be more supportive of it.
That provides a coherent explanation for the difference between male and female donors. It really is eye-opening how these deep-seated social dynamics can play out in something like deciding who to donate a few dollars to.
It is. And it connects, to other real-world observations. The authors link it to things like the known gender gaps in venture capital funding. Maybe some of the same subtle biases are at play there, too.
That's a really important connection. What about the practical side? What are the real-world implications or takeaways from these findings?
I think the implications are significant, especially for anyone working towards gender equality, whether in policy or in organizations. It suggests that we need to look beyond the obvious forms of bias, like in hiring or pay, and consider these more subtle biases in everyday helping behaviors.
Because those small instances of withholding full support could really add up.
Exactly. They could cumulatively disadvantage women in professional settings. So one implication is the need for awareness. Just making people, perhaps especially men in positions to offer support, aware that this kind of bias can exist, even unconsciously, might be a first step, highlighting the potential negative impact on businesswomen.
So interventions could focus on recognizing and counteracting this specific reluctance to fully support women in empowering contexts.
Precisely. Understanding the why, the link to empathy, and potentially hierarchy maintenance could help design more effective interventions.
Now, no study is perfect. Did the researchers talk about limitations or where future research should go?
Yes, they were clear about that. First, the context was limited to fires. Would the same pattern hold for, say, business struggles due to mismanagement versus external factors? Blame might play a role.
Good point. Different scenarios could yield different results.
Definitely. Also, these were hypothetical donation scenarios. It's always valuable to see if this translates to real-world behavior, maybe looking at actual donation data or face-to-face appeals.
Real stakes, real money.
Right. And they also suggest digging deeper into the motivations. They measured empathy, but future work could directly measure things like individual differences in social dominance orientation, how much someone personally endorses social hierarchies, or maybe levels of hostile sexism, to see if those predict this pattern.
So exploring the individual psychological drivers more directly.
Exactly. And perhaps even experimentally trying to activate or deactivate the motivation to protect the gender hierarchy to see if that changes helping behavior. Oh, and one more thing they noted, their empathy measure was just a single item, so using more comprehensive, validated scales in the future would strengthen the findings about its mediating role.
Okay, so plenty of avenues for follow-up research. If we were to boil this all down, what are the absolute key takeaways from our deep dive into this study by